Good evening, everybody. It's 6 o'clock and we'll start. First of all, welcome. It's so wonderful to see you all here to support our colleagues and the professions of nursing and midwifery. We're delighted to have you all here. And I see colleagues from across the college, colleagues from medicine here. So it's wonderful here to celebrate Tracey and Avey's careers and their future exciting ideas for nursing and midwifery. So my name is Professor Richard Harding. I'm the Executive Dean of the Florence Nightingale Faculty of Nursing, Midwifery and Palliative Care here at King's College London. And it's my enormous pleasure to invite you to the Perseverance Trust Nightingale Fellowship Lecture, which is extra special this year because, of course, we're celebrating the appointments of Tracey Carter, MBE, and Avey Bhatia, OBE, as professors of the practice of nursing within our faculty. And we are going to enjoy their inaugural lectures this evening to mark that. Particular welcome also to those joining us online. It's being live streamed, and we have colleagues and friends joining us from across the country, from across the Perseverance Trust, the Nightingale Fellowship, and our partner organisations. So welcome to everybody online. We have a full room here. I need to do a few quick housekeeping things, please. So first of all, fire exits are at the back and at the front, stage right, if you need them. The toilets are just outside of the lecture theatre. The event is being filmed and live streamed, as I said, so if you do need to leave, if you could do so quietly, we'd appreciate that. Please take a moment to make sure that your phones are off or to silent. And to remind you, really important bit, the two lectures are really important, and the next important bit is the drinks and the canapes afterwards. So please do join us in the Jean Hanson room. I'll tell you again at the end how to get there to the next building. A few words about us as a faculty. So the Faculty of Nursing, Midwifery and Palliative Care here at King's College London is a direct descendant of the Nightingale Training School, which was begun with Florence Nightingale in 1860. And her legacy and that original training school continue today within our faculty as a world-class institute in education and research in nursing, midwifery and palliative care. And of course, the faculty has also been joined by the Cicely Saunders Institute, begun by Dame Cicely, and we carry forward her vision also within the faculty. We're also delighted, of course, that King's College London this year was ranked #1 in the world for nursing in the QS rankings, and we're delighted that the fantastic research and education conducted in our faculty has been recognised in this way. And it's a great reflection of our staff and our students and the work of our alumni carrying forward our name around the world and doing many exciting things. In terms of our partners this evening, I would really like to extend particular thanks to the Perseverance Trust and the Nightingale Fellowship for their historic and continued ongoing support for our faculty and our endeavours. These charitable organisations over many years have promoted the study and the practice of nursing, providing financial assistance to nurses, midwives and hospital staff in need. And their support to date has achieved things like these lectures, hardship funding for many of our students, and also some key strategic activities within our faculty. For example, it's funded our faculty lead for widening participation, led by Kevin Fernandez-Mills, and I know there are some students here this evening who've been engaging in that work, and it's enabled us to drive forward the K+ programme, which supports students from very diverse backgrounds to prepare for a university course. And this year alone, we've seen 39 students under the K+ programme who have joined us for taster sessions, clinical skills simulations, career guidance, and received tailored application advice to enable them to enter the degree course. So a huge thank you to the Perseverance Trust and the Nightingale Fellowship. Your work really is essential to the profession, and your legacy funding really enables us to strengthen our faculty and to achieve our goals. So thank you very much for that. I also want to mention for our faculty, a key part of our commitment to the future of nursing is King's Health Partners. We work with KHP to help place nursing, midwifery and palliative care research and education at the very heart of our health and care system here in London. And our speakers tonight, Avey and Tracey, embody this partnership through their leadership roles within our partner NHS trusts, so Guy's and St Thomas's and King's College Hospital, and through their very clear personal commitment to building the next generation of nurse leaders. They're both outstanding role models for all of our students within our faculty, and we know that their continued presence as professors of the practice of nursing will not only help us shape our faculty, but deliver for the wider profession for many years to come. And we're delighted today to invite them to give their inaugural lectures. So our first speaker this evening is Professor Avey Bhatia, OBE. Avey qualified in 1991 with clinical experience across theatres, coronary care and cardiothoracic intensive care. Her leadership trajectory includes pivotal chief nurse roles in Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells, St George's University Hospitals, and then Guy's and St Thomas's NHS Foundation Trust, where Avey currently serves as chief nurse. Her influence extends way beyond our footprint to national roles, including president of the Florence Nightingale Foundation, honorary vice president of the Nightingale Fellowship, and a prominent advocate for excellence in clinical leadership and compassionate care. And this year, I'm delighted that Avey was awarded her OBE for services to NHS nursing. So tonight, Avey will speak on the synergy of compassion, leadership, and technology in nursing and midwifery. Please join me in welcoming Avey.
Right, so good evening, everyone. I'm so pleased to see all of you here today, and of course, those that are watching the live stream. A very warm welcome to my family, those that are here and those that are online, colleagues, past and present, and esteemed guests. Your support absolutely means the world to me. I would like to start, though, by thanking Professor Richard Harding and Professor Graham Lord. Your support and encouragement is very much appreciated. And without that, I wouldn't be here as Professor of Nursing Practice. I also want to extend a huge thanks to Professor Mary Malone. Where is Mary? We work very closely with Mary to absolutely ensure that we deliver the best possible education, training and experience for our student nurses. I'm really excited to share my career and leadership journey with you and also share some reflections and insights on technology during this lecture. So thank you for being here and sharing this experience with me. So what is the objective of my talk today? So I want to explore how we ensure the delivery of compassionate care in an advancing technological healthcare environment. Compassion is absolutely the essence of nursing, and communication, having really effective communication and building trust and understanding with our patients and their families and each other is absolutely essential for better healthcare outcomes. So what I will do is I will explore technology through my leadership journey. And this picture here, so this is staff nurse Lily, and the student nurse is student nurse Kazia, who's a first-year student at King's College, and I will come on and talk about them a little bit later. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, where do I come from? So I explain that I come from the United Kingdom, and then the question persists, but where do you come from? I say, okay, I'm from England, but where do you really come from? So I go into Kent and then explain that I was born and brought up in the Medway towns in Kent. But actually the question that they're really asking is, where do your parents come from? So my parents come from India, and they come from the region of Punjab, which is in that circle there. It's just north of Delhi. And this is a map of the Punjab, and this is Jalandhar, and we're just on the outskirts of there in rural Punjab. This is me at my dad's house in the village in rural Punjab, and this was taken last year. And we still got a family that live there, and I'm showing this because I'm very proud of my heritage. This is my dad. My dad, we lost him on the 7th of January in 1999, and we still miss him as if it was yesterday. My dad, he wasn't an educated man. He came here in the early 1960s. He didn't speak English, so he wasn't educated, but he was an immensely resourceful man. And me and my sisters, we take every opportunity that we can to honour him. And these pictures here, these were taken at Everest Base Camp, where they have prayer flags all around the Himalayas. So this is my younger sister, and when we were there, we used the opportunity to tie our own flag, which was to honour my dad. And if he saw me standing here today, he would be immensely proud. So I qualified in 1991 as a nurse, and it all started here. This is the Maidstone School of Nursing, and we stayed in the rooms there, and this part of the building here was the actual School of Nursing. It was a fantastic building. It's all knocked down now, and there's houses now. So this was on the Hermitage Lane. And then what you used to do is walk up to Maidstone Hospital for your clinical placements. So it was very convenient. You paid minimal rent, there were no travel costs, and you got paid for training. So it was a win-win back in those days. And here I am, the class of 1987. So this was taken on the first day of our clinical placement. And the other question I get asked a lot is, well, why did you become a nurse? And that is because my friend there, Palm and I went to college together where we did our A-levels, and she informed me that she was going to go off after her training to be a nurse. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. Maybe I could do that. You get a profession. I was very good at human biology, so I thought that might help. And also, it was an opportunity to gain some independence, so leave home, not too far away from home, but maybe my parents would agree to that, and they did. So I applied, and me and Palm, plus I was with a friend, so me and Palm went to the Maidstone School of Nursing. And if you haven't recognised me, because it was a very long time ago, this is me here. The other person I want to point out is Jude. Jude was my first role model. She was an exceptional student nurse from day one. She had so much energy. Everybody loved her, the patients, the staff. She was just absolutely phenomenal, where I was actually quite shy and timid and very, very nervous and anxious. And I thought, God, one day I want to be like her. She was absolutely phenomenal. So for the next 11 years, it was all about experience and working my way up. So I started at Maidstone, and in those days, there was an expectation that you would do 6 months on a medical ward, 6 months on a surgical ward. There weren't that many jobs in those days, believe it or not, and unfortunately, I wasn't one of the ones that managed to get one of those jobs. So I ended up in theatres, probably the place I wanted least to go, but that's where I ended up. And I wasn't very good. So I stayed there for a short while, and then I moved into recovery, and from there into intensive care, and I absolutely loved intensive care. And then I went to coronary care. I was asked to set up the coronary care unit at Maidstone Hospital. And one Sunday morning, after we'd transferred 4 of our 6 patients to either King's or to Guy's and St Thomas's, I thought I'd better find out what goes on in London. That's where all the interesting, complex patients are going. So I got a job in the sort of mid-1990s at St Thomas's Hospital in the intensive care unit there. And I was a D-grade staff nurse, so very, very, very junior. And then during those 11 years at St Thomas's Hospital, I met my husband. This is my husband, and we met at St Thomas's, and no, it was not a Mills and Boon, for those that can remember romance. It was certainly not one of those. It was actually me standing over him and saying, haven't you got that cannula in yet? But anyway, after some stops and starts, we did get married, and this is a picture of me on my wedding day with my sisters and my mum, and we got married in 2000, just a year and a bit after my dad had passed away. Right, so what was it like to work in intensive care back in those days? At the end of every patient bed, you had these huge charts, and I absolutely loved them. And my sole purpose was to fill in those charts as neatly as I possibly could. And there were papers everywhere, blood results, patient notes, all in different places. I look back now and think, God, how did we coordinate care? But that's what it was like. But I loved these charts. And these pens were a lifeline. We were able to use the red, blue, and green, red, blue, and black. We could not use the green. Does anyone know why nurses couldn't use the green? Because the pharmacists used the green, and we did not want to get into trouble. Still do it, someone said. And there, I really grounded my intensive care experience, and I met Professor Richard Leach there. He taught me so much. So on the ward rounds, he used to use them as teaching rounds. And I remember once when I was busy looking at my chart and the small monitors with the green sort of squiggly lines, he said to me, don't look at the monitor, don't look at the chart, look at your patient, feel your patient, touch your patient. And I took that with me throughout my intensive care career, really. He's a real role model for me as well. This is a picture of me at Hammersmith Hospital. Yes, don't laugh. I was the face of recruitment, as you can see there. And then the absolute eagle-eyed of you, those with eagle eyes will see that the pen is there, nice and prominent. I worked my way up to sister at the Hammersmith, and then I left Hammersmith Hospital to go to St George's. And I went to St George's because they at the time were doing a lung and heart transplant programme as well as cardiothoracic surgery. So I went there and became a senior sister. But that was the time when my career pivoted really, and I got into operational management at St George's, but that wasn't easy. And the key reason I managed to break into operational management is because of this gentleman. This is Daniel Elkeles. Many of you in the room will know him. He's Chief Exec of NHS Providers at the moment, and previously he was CEO of the London Ambulance Service and many different Chief Execs roles previous to that. But when I met Daniel, he was a general manager for cardiology and cardiothoracic services, and after applying for so many jobs, he said, well, come and be a business manager for me. And I always talk a lot about Daniel because he meant so much to me. He's been absolutely fantastic for me, a real role model. He's fantastically bright, and he taught me the importance of data and attention to detail. And that is a key skill of mine. I think colleagues would agree, is my attention to detail and remembering data. But I learned that from Daniel. So I did message him to say that I'll be talking about him today. And then what was it like then? So look at this setup in my spare bedroom. Working for Daniel, although I loved it, it was not easy. He was such a taskmaster. And it was a steep learning curve for me because I needed, I'd gone from clinical practice and then had to go and learn how to do pie charts and graphs and use Excel. That wasn't my skill set, but it was absolutely what Daniel demanded, and he demanded it fast. So I used to sit here at this computer, and when I zoom into that photo, I'm actually doing an action plan. And this picture was taken by my husband late one night when he said, come on now, you really must come to bed. But seriously though, who would have imagined at that time the access to technology and mobile devices that we have now? It's just incredible. Some of you will remember the screeching dial-up internet that took forever. So I feel we are in a similar position now. We can't yet fully understand and appreciate how technology and the way we will work and care for our patients in the future. But what we do know is nurses leading and engaging and driving it is absolutely crucial for workflows and tools that enhance efficiency and safety and not impede it. During that time, my daughter came along, Mia. She'll probably hate that picture, but there you are. So this was actually taken in a GP surgery, believe it or not, when we did have appointments. So it's a very busy time. So Mia came along in 2003, so it's balancing busy job, progressing my career and being mum. I took a year off, and then went back actually full-time with childcare in nurseries. I think in total, me and my husband got through 6 nannies through the course of childcare. After my maternity leave, I went back and they were doing a restructure. And we like our restructures in the NHS because of financial savings. And I suggested that I could do a joint role, a head of nursing and an assistant general manager. That was absolutely perfect for me because I could keep my clinical role going, my clinical management experience going, as well as operational management. So it was fantastic. During that time, I was absolutely hell-bent on having a second child. And I say I rather than we, because I was absolutely obsessed after having several miscarriages. And I was at work, still at St George's, and I was having another miscarriage and I had to be rushed for emergency surgery. And I remember lying on one of those theatre trolleys, waiting to go into theatres, and they're getting fluids and bloods in me. And I remember lying there and I had tears rolling down my face. And then suddenly I felt this touch on my hand. It was a student nurse who said to me, "Please don't cry. They're going to look after you and you're going to be fine." And that's something I will never forget. So the importance of touch and her noticing that was a fantastic example of compassionate care. And that came from a first-year student nurse. I then made the tough decision to actually leave St George's, because I'd been at St George's at this point for 10 years and progressed right up to divisional director of nursing level. And was it a good decision? I still sort of think about that, because we went to what was called then, it doesn't exist anymore, but South London Healthcare Trust. I went there to be deputy chief nurse to Jenny Hall, who's here with us today. She was the chief nurse at South London Healthcare Trust. And the other attraction for me there was Dr. Chris Strether, who was chief executive there. And I knew Chris from my St George's day, where he was a renal physician. So went to South London Healthcare Trust, and I think Jenny would agree, and Jenny will say, it was quite a unique experience, a unique yet exceptional experience, but I'll come on to a bit more of that later. When I was a business manager working with Daniel, I'd also started my master's in health service management. But I did put that on pause because my husband, we're managing work and family, and my husband at the time was doing a PhD. So I picked that up much later on. And I did get my master's, and instead of health service management, it had then become a master's in public administration. So I was very, very proud of this, because I trained to be a nurse before it was a degree-educated profession. So that was my degree, and I was so proud. And on that side, I also got Student of the Year. So that was an extra bonus. I don't think it was because of my academic proudness, but it was because the way I worked and supported other students who were on the programme. And then Harry Singh Bhatia came along, my son, after all the difficulties, and he's here today, 13 years old. So yeah, absolutely brilliant. So balancing everything is difficult, and Mia's favourite line is, "You never came to sports day." Well, I did actually. I've got evidence. We like our evidence, don't we? So I did come to sports day. It might have just been the once, but once to my sons and once to my husband. But I did indeed go to sports day. And I think the point I want to talk about here is how difficult it is prioritising really, really busy jobs and sort of managing your family as well. And I must admit, I wasn't very good at it, and I made some decisions and some priorities which I would very much do differently. And I don't know if Amanda is here, Amanda Pritchard, but we were talking we were talking just a few weeks ago about as you get more experienced and more senior, you actually learn to prioritise much, much better. And so I just wanted to put that in there, not to prove that I was at Sports Day, but to say I didn't really get my priorities right when I was younger. And this is a note, a sort of memo that Vice President Biden actually sent to his team. And you can read it there, but he was quite clear in terms of his expectations for people that work with him. And I just think that's such a fantastic example of compassionate leadership and something we could all learn from. So your job no longer exists. So this was back in the South London Healthcare Trust days. It was really quite a difficult period. It was an organisation that was struggling financially and from a quality perspective, so went into administration. I still think it's the only organisation that has ever gone into administration, but it was actually the right thing to do because we couldn't maintain the standards that we needed to. And so after a really difficult day, I got home and there was a letter on the mat which I opened it, said your job no longer exists. So I think, Jenny, you would agree, it's a pretty brutal time, wasn't it? And also to say, the one thing I learned so much from Jenny, but one of the key things I learned from Jenny during that time is, yes, you're a director on a board as a nurse, but you're a director in its entirety, not just sticking to your nursing portfolio, is contribute to the whole portfolio. And I really learned that from Jenny. Many other things, but I probably can't mention those here. But anyway, your job no longer exists. So I needed to decide what was I going to do. There were plenty of options, but I decided I needed to get a new job and I needed a chief nurse job. And it just so happened that the chief nurse at Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells, that opportunity came up and I applied. And I ended up back to where it had all started at Maidstone and Tunbridge Wells Hospital. It was absolutely fantastic. 5-10 minutes down the road from where I live. I live in Tunbridge Wells, so it was really good from that perspective. I knew lots of people there because I was a student nurse there. My husband worked there, so it was absolutely fantastic. It wasn't easy though. It never is it? We had some tricky times there, and there's one particular after a CQC inspection. I thought to myself, I'm not sure I can do this. So I remember ringing up Peter Blythin. Some of you might know him. He worked in the NHS. He's just retired for about 50 years. And he was at Manchester in his last job as Group Chief People Officer. And I phoned him up and said, Peter, this is really tough. I'm not sure I can do this. And his words of wisdom was, keep your head down and get on with your job. And that was exactly what I did. So I was there for a few days, and then along came Dame Ruth May. Now, I thought she was coming to tell me off because we'd gone into financial special measures and she wanted to know how I was going to navigate that. But actually she came and said to me, there's a job opportunity at St George's, it's a secondment, would you be interested? And again, decisions, I thought, yes, absolutely, I will swap my 5 to 10 minute commute for a 2-hour commute door to door. So that's what I did. St George's was in difficulty at those times. It was in quality special measures. It also then went into financial special measures. And when I arrived at St George's, I made it quite clear that I was not going to leave until we had come out of quality special measures. And I led the writing of this document, which is our quality improvement plan. And it included digital estates and workforce issues as well, because they're all sort of interlinked. Outstanding care every time is a strapline that they still use to today. I was at St George's until 2020, so I was there during the first wave of the pandemic, and then the opportunity came up at Guy's and St Thomas's, and that's the first time that opportunity has come up in 15 years. Dame Eileen Seals had been there for 15 years. So I applied and I was successful and I got that job. So I left my beloved St George's and went to my beloved Guy's and St Thomas's. And my God, what a journey we've had in the last 5 years at Guy's and St Thomas's. So I have to talk a bit about EPIC. Just before EPIC went in, I think it's about 12, 18 months before EPIC, we had an awful digital system failure. And it was quite interesting, the generational gap when you don't have electronic EHR. So the older nurses like myself were absolutely fine. They got their drug prescription charts out and off they went, not really a problem. But for the younger generation who'd never really worked in a paper-based system, really struggled, really struggled. They were finding it, the hands were getting tired with writing, the step count had gone up phenomenally because they were having to go to clinical areas to write drugs. They even got a phone call to the CNO office to say, we've run out of pens. So it was quite an interesting time. And at the same, and it took ages to get our systems back because we had about 400 different systems that needed to come back online. And hence EPIC was going to be one of the solutions to that, a single system. And I led the implementation of EPIC with Ellis Pullinger, the SRO at King's. And this was at that time, I don't know if it still is now, but at that time it was the largest single global go live in EPIC's history. And it was a phenomenal effort between us, King's, and Synovus, our pathology provider. And these pictures are from the sort of 24 hours of go live. And this is the sort of command center. And here, I don't know if you can see him, but we've got Clive there, who's with us today. We've got Ian Abbs, myself, and other colleagues pretending that we're switching on EPIC. And there's me pretending again. And it was actually this gentleman here who pressed a button, and we went live with EPIC. But it was an extraordinary time, and I still maintain today that one of the hardest things you do in the NHS is implement a new electronic healthcare record. In 2023, the Queen's Nursing Institute did a survey on the adoption of technology in the community setting and found that there is a high level of digital literacy amongst nurses. But the poor user experience is linked to design and function and the sort of scheduling tools in the EHRs that don't necessarily improve productivity. Most respondents actually said that they didn't know who their most senior nurse was for technology. And if they did have one, they didn't know how to access. There's lots of lessons there. But we did during EPIC, and now we've got a Chief Nursing Information Officer, Katrina, who's with us today, and her team, who absolutely drive technology through the nursing profession. I post a nurse here, Kendra, who's also with us today, Kendra Schneller, who MBE, who is nurse practitioner in inclusion health. I spoke to Kendra and said, so what difference has EPIC made? And Kendra said to me, it has most definitely improved access to patient records across healthcare settings. So, for example, if patients been in the inpatient or emergency care, as well as access to the London Care Record. Still some challenges, particularly the way Kendra's service works in terms of a drop-in rather than a pure appointment type system. But community have been using tablets for a long time, so does it really impact in terms of compassion and caring? And we talked a bit about that, and she said, well, absolutely not. In the service that she works in, refugees and asylum seekers, the time that they have with their patients is so precious, so they've done everything that they can to make sure they keep that relationship and still do some real-time data entry, but that relationship has not at all been compromised by EPIC or electronic systems. So what about inpatient areas? So this is Dorcas ward. This Dorcas ward on the Guy site, an absolute exemplar ward. So I thought I would go there and speak to the nurses who you saw in an earlier photograph, Lily and Chrisia. And I spoke to them about these computers on wheels, you know, that barrier between the patient and the nurse, you know, wheeling those around at all times. So I asked for them to give me their views on it, and they were extremely insightful. First of all, with their clickety-clack on the keyboard, they gave me a whole tour of EPIC and the improvements that we could continue to make. They talked about how crucial training is and how crucial it is that nurses continue to drive improvements, which we absolutely do. So then I spoke to them about caring and compassion. How does that impact wheeling these around all the time? And they said, well, yeah, actually, we've been thinking about that. And as a ward, what we've decided is that we do not take these computers on wheels into bays between 10 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the afternoon for that exact reason. Instead, what we do is use these mobile devices. You can see those here. We use these mobile devices. They're called rovers. And you can do everything on a rover, real-time data entry. You can do your medications. She said there's no real reason that we need to take. So I think that reinforces that solutions come from the front line. So I don't believe we are in danger of losing compassionate nursing in the digital age. I think nurses will continue to evolve, as does technology. And then finally, the other question I often get asked is, what are you most proud of? And I am extremely proud of winning this Nursing Times Award, which we won in 2023. And this award is a Dame Elizabeth Honorary Award for inclusivity in nursing and midwifery. And there were about 12 finalists for this award. And the reason we won this award is for our Kofowola Avey Pratt Fellowship Programme at Guy's and St Thomas's, which is for nurses, midwives and AHP from a global majority. And as an Asian chief nurse in one of the largest trusts in this country, supporting nurses, midwives and AHPs from the global majority is my duty and an absolute honour. So I'm really proud of that fellowship. And just to say, in the centre here, we've got Raz Carley, who is an AHP at Brompton, and she has just won this year's HSJ Clinical Leader of the Year award. I think it's the first time that an AHP has won that award, and she was one of the very first to go through our Kofowola Avey Pratt Fellowship. So it does have, absolutely has impact. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Avey, for your simply wonderful inaugural lecture. It's my great pleasure to now invite Tracey Carter, MBE, Professor of the Practice of Nursing at King's, to give her inaugural lecture. Tracey qualified in 1992 and has over 30 years of experience in oncology, palliative care and haematology. Tracey currently serves as Chief Nurse and Executive Director of Midwifery at King's College Hospital NHS Foundation Trust, providing professional leadership for more than 6,000 nursing, midwifery and AHP staff. Tracey's leadership has shaped infection prevention and control, safeguarding and professional culture across multiple NHS trusts. And I'm delighted that Tracey was awarded an MBE in 2010 for services to nursing and the NHS, and the Chief Nursing Officer Award in 2019. Tonight, Tracey will speak on involving the mind and spirit of the nursing and midwifery professions. Please join me in welcoming Tracey Carter.
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I'm really honoured that King's College London has bestowed a professorship on me, and it's lovely to have so many people in the room, but also online as well. Thank you to my family that are here as well at the back of the room. It's great to have you here, and many of my colleagues who've made the journey over today and those who are online. As I thought about doing this inaugural lecture, I did think to myself, God, can somebody else do it for me? As anybody who knows me knows that I don't really like standing up and public speaking, but also talking about myself. So in some ways, this will be a peek into my life, which might be quite terrifying for some people as I talk this through. So thank you so much to Mary and Richard, who are here today as well, for believing in me and giving me the moral support to be here as well. And it's great to have Graham here as well to do some of the final words as well and closure. I know Avey and I are both very honoured with that. So I wanted to really think about I suppose I'll just, so this is about the only picture there is of me with some bangs. I don't know what possessed me to have that fringe, and Linda Lee Potter. And this was just as I'd qualified, actually, and my parents were in the audience, and I was very proud to have become a registered nurse. I think as I've gone through my journey, I've been really interested in recognising the generations and the role that this plays in the development of the profession, and the importance of nurturing this in leadership. And it really came to the fore for me when I became a chief nurse in 2014. When there was some work by Birmingham Children's Hospital, and they came and did a presentation at a clinical leaders event. And it really made me think quite differently. Throughout this talk, I'm going to sort of pick up various different things throughout my career and how I think that generational piece plays a big difference. And I suppose I'm going to pick up on the significance of being sensitive to the different generations when it comes to relationships with patients, and recognising the unique preferences as well and communication styles and health beliefs of each generation. And I did test this out with my colleagues actually yesterday, boomers to zoomers, and there were some puzzled looks and some smiles in the room as well. So I'm going to pick up on that bit. But I suppose it's not just a professional imperative, but a key factor of leadership as well to achieve good patient experience and outcomes. And I'm going to take a look at the generations as part of this and bring that back to the mind and spirit. A film that I've always really loved is Back to the Future. It's, you know, it's very easy, but I love that film. And I think in a way, the best way to predict the future is to invent it. That's always really, it was shared with me by a chief nurse that I worked for, and it's always really stayed with me over the years as well. And I suppose in my prep for this presentation, it really surprised me how much research there is now on this topic, and how that's really built up in the last few years as well. And I looked at the World Health Organization, and they're sort of estimating 29 million nurses worldwide, 2.2 million midwives, and they estimate a shortage of around about 4.5 million nurses and 0.3 million midwives by the year 2030. And that really struck me. And also that the global shortage of health workers estimated is about just shy of 5 million. And mainly across sort of Africa, Southeast Asia, and sort of the Mediterranean region as well. And actually, nurses and midwives play a pivotal role in improving health and contributing to the wider economy. And I think really, you know, delivering care in many, many different settings as well and shaping policy. So the generations sort of, you know, I think is really important, and how we take that into our leadership. So my direction, this slide is that I'm actually very dyslexic and dyspraxic as well. And so my brain doing this speech and L times is probably just like it is there with all the letters jumbled up all over the place. And so I really had to think about retraining my brain in terms of my learning and what I did throughout my career. Because I really found it quite difficult at times, and that was a bit of a barrier as part of that. But actually, I always wanted to be a nurse. I'm one of those really boring people. Wanted to be a nurse, did everything I could to be a nurse. I do remember one time I went into the Luton and Dunstable Hospital to have my teeth out, and I was only there overnight. And my mum came in to spend time with me, as your parents do. And I was so disappointed that she turned up, because I wanted to be there on my own and I loved it. It was great to be in the Bay, and I did send her home early. And I think that was a pivotal moment when she knew that I desperately wanted to be a nurse. I read every Sue Barton book going, and that was about 45 years after they'd been published. I hadn't realised that at the time. They were published back in 1936, but they seem so current, but actually are out of date in many ways in terms of descriptions of treatments, and they're probably more historical, I suppose, than current when I read a few passages just recently. And my other guilty secret was, as a teenager, I loved to read Jackie Collins, sorry. I read every Jackie Collins book there was. And at the time, I suppose in many ways, it was about feminism and pushing away prejudice of the past. And it was changing times, different generations. And I suppose when I look back, that is all about that generational piece and the importance of that. And in some ways, Jackie Collins was real people in disguise. And I suppose I always really focused on that, and actually how that if people tell me I can't do something, then of course I always can. Even, how much it might have been difficult at times, I could always do it. And certainly, there are many people throughout my career that really believed in me to do that. So I canter through my career in pictures. I trained actually at Mount Vernon, Harefield and Hillingdon, and that is up the top there. So Mount Vernon is the first one, Harefield, and then the second was Hillingdon there. And the nursing school was over the back. Now I lived in, just up here in the nurses' home opposite the psychiatric unit, which was a big part of the campus at the time. And I used to walk across the road there into the School of Nursing, and then spent time moving around Mount Vernon and Harefield, where I really enjoyed oncology, and I did an oncology placement on Marie Curie ward at Mount Vernon, and I really enjoyed that whole working with people, getting to know them, and finding I think people brought you into their lives and shared with things with you that even their nearest and dearest didn't know. It was really the start of a long career in oncology. There were very few jobs available at that time, and I was really lucky. There was 9 jobs when I qualified that were available in Mount Vernon, Harefield and Hillingdon. And luckily, the other girl that went for the job on Marie Curie ward got a job at Harefield, because I think she would have got that job. And maybe my career might have been quite different. Thank you, Carla. I was very, very grateful. And she had long blonde hair and was much prettier and better at these things than me. Thank God she got the job there. And then I did a couple of years there, and then I, as a staff nurse, and then I went on to work at the Royal Marsden Hospital. This is the Fulham Road end, but I did work across Fulham Road and Sutton, where I did my degree in oncology, and I really enjoyed that 2 years. I think it gave me an insight into many different things. I worked as a research nurse. I worked in the clinical areas as a staff nurse across the different sites. I did the bone marrow transplant programme that was run by Ray Powell's at the time, and his brother Trevor was in the breast service there. And it was a real eye-opener, and I really built some fantastic skills as part of that. But also oncology gave me an opportunity to look outwards as well. And then I went on and became a Macmillan nurse at Ealing Hospital, And on the back of doing the work at the Marsden, and worked there for a few years. Very different place now, Ealing Hospital, but at the time it did have an A&E and a maternity unit, and I worked there for a few years as part of that. And then I went on to work at Barnet and Chase Farm as a deputy chief nurse. And I think probably at that point, some of the generational aspects really came to the fore, because it was the Healthcare Commission at that time. We'd got notice around infection control, and actually there was a lot to really think about and doing how to engage the workforce. And I think that really came home to me at that time about the importance of some of the generational piece, although I didn't quite know it in the same way. And worked there for a few years, and then was lucky enough to get a job at Barts in London. Barts in London also became Barts Health, as many of you know, and I was the deputy chief nurse there, and I can remember going through the merger, and it was a strange time really, because the 12 months before I spent a lot of time preparing for merging, and I can remember writing my own job description because I needed to reapply for my job and do various different things, you know, doing all of the due diligence as part of that. And but it was a good grounding actually. It made me really think quite differently about change and what it feels like personally to be part of that change, working as a team, and those relationships. And then I went for several different chief nurse jobs. I didn't get them. And then Samantha Jones gave me my first chief nurse job at West Herts. And I was really grateful to her for believing in me. And although maybe it was more difficult then, because 6 months later in the job, the CQC did a full inspection and we became inadequate. So probably not so grateful at that point. But actually, it was probably the making of me in some ways, because I did just get my head down. And I can remember somebody saying to me, "How do you feel about this, Tracey? What do you think?" And I said, I'm not worrying about whether I'll still have a job or whether I'll be here. What I need to do is get my head down and get on, and we need to do the right things. And then I'll worry about what else happens as it happens. I spent, you know, a fantastic 9 years there, and really enjoyed that job, and working through the pandemic as well as part of that. And then, of course, coming to King's, which I didn't actually apply for the job at first at King's because I wasn't sure that I would get it. And I thought, I don't know if other people will be going for this job. And actually, it's a very prestigious organisation, so maybe I shouldn't go for it. But I spoke to the regional chief nurse and regional chief nurse for London and the one for East of England, and they really encouraged me, and here I am today. So. I suppose that as part of that, I really started to think about what I'd learned as a student and as a newly qualified nurse around. I really thought about Patricia Benner's work, which is a systematic way of understanding how students and new nurses and midwives develop skills. So a shared theory, and really thinking about those 5 levels and how caring requires learning that nurses and midwives gain based on education through their training into their practice. And as part of that, teamwork is essential for nursing and midwifery profession. And hospitals are made up of teams where different generations and different levels of knowledge and acquisition described in her model sort of coexist. But what I really noticed is that coexistencies can lead to difficult teamwork. And I think where experienced nurses and midwives comment on aspects around responsibilities, interest in learning on the part of younger generations. And while younger or beginner nurses actually feel quite undervalued and judged within teams around that, and actually what can we do differently, and how those prejudices can create quite a negative workplace climate as well, and affects the overall productivity and impacts on care, patient care, so how people feel themselves, but also ultimately patient care. And I suppose some of that can be related to language or communication, because we all communicate in very different ways as different generations. And therefore, sometimes I think it's necessary to find a solution to improve teamwork for the different generations, and really think about the difference in values between generations and how that leads to conflict. And I suppose the framework of novice to expert actually really helps us do that, I think. And even though it was, back in 1982, if I think about that, actually, your novice being your student nurse, or, coming into practice, your advanced beginner, so probably somebody who's been qualified a year or so, starts to recognise those repeated conditions and situations they've seen before, feeling responsible for what's going on in the care of a patient. And also not just tasks, but what's really important to do as part of that. And they're always looking for good teachers in the clinical setting. Thinking about competency, so much better skills and experience by the time you're at the competent level, but actually finding it harder still to be flexible and maybe multitask in the same way. And the importance of mentorship in the workplace as part of this, so that you can really see that change in a patient's condition. And then that proficient level, so oversight of the wider clinical situation, which is never linear in any way, shape or form. And then that expert level, which is all about nuances, anticipating subtle changes in clinical situations and knowing how to prioritise and get things done. And I think at that level, often people feel quite frustrated working with more junior staff, and it's how do we bring that together to get the best out of everybody. And I sort of noticed that, I think, in myself as well. When I was doing my oncology, I did reach that expert level. Where I absolutely could multitask. I was flexible. I had all those skills and experience. I could direct the teams that I was working with, and really recognise everything. And that was a fantastic feeling. But I suppose in leadership, it's different. And do you ever become an expert? I'm not sure you always become an expert, actually. And I think there's always room to grow your knowledge and experience at that level. And I think in leadership, you have to be open to that all the time. There is always something else to learn. There's always something else to do. And learning from the different generations. I did an open forum for the students, and it was a real eye-opener about the things that they talked to me about. And I felt like those of you that are old enough will remember Marjorie Proops and Claire Rayner. But and I felt like that, but actually for them it was more TikTok and influencers in terms of what that meant for them. But actually the conversations that we had and then things that they asked were very much around how they felt in the workplace, real interest in health strategy as well, and their own healthcare. And it was really interesting conversations, and something that I will definitely invest in more as well as we move forward, because I think as a leader you don't ever become that full expert. You do need to continue that knowledge, that innovation, and working with people as part of that. So the generations, which I said I would come back to. So this is my boomers to zoomers. Now this is Gen X. So boomers are those that were born sort of 1946 up until sort of the early 60s. And for Gen X, I'm Gen X, is that latchkey kids. And do you know, that's so true. I was my mum's in the room. She was like, but my mum worked full time, and I was a latchkey kid. I used to hide it in the garage under the pod, just to let myself in from school, and absolutely around, you know, highly educated, problem solving, structure and direction there, as you can see, but those entrepreneurial traits as well. And really loyal to the career and to the, you know, NHS at large. And probably now, I would say, not necessarily 40% of the NHS workforce. I would say actually probably more like 20 I would think around about 30, about 25% of the workforce now. Gen X, probably 25 to 30% of the workforce. So quite a different way of looking at things, but you can see pragmatic. We do like tech, but we don't necessarily completely live and breathe it in the same way. And we do have very high expectations as well. And I suppose for thinking about that, you know, Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z are all coexisting in the workplace, and that's why effective leadership has become more complex. And each generation brings different skills and values and expectations, which make it crucial for leaders to adapt their style to effectively manage that. But a great potential for innovation and productivity as well, as part of that. I suppose if I think around Gen Y, so probably around about 45% of the workforce now, really like feedback to motivate and develop. Very career motivated, but expect support and progression around that. Reputation of where they work is really important as well, and want to work with you, not for you. And I think that's a really important point as well. More motivated by purpose necessarily than money, but also want to contribute to the greater good as well. And as you can see, sort of, you know, maybe more you know, financial support from home as part of that. Tech, this is a generation that were born into tech as well, but really value that mentorship and coaching and that reassurance as well as part of that. And embrace diversity as well, but want more work-life balance. So absolutely, I aim to spend, you know, my family and my friends, and I need a sense of belonging. So, you know, thinking a bit differently as part of that. And then Gen Z, our Zoomers. So around about 20%. And of course, they've been exposed to advanced tech all their lives. And, you know, very pragmatic due to growing up through global unrest, thinking about the pandemic and things as well. Opinions really swayed by peers. So that sort of bite-sized information, that feedback in the workplace and day-to-day life, and that social media is really important. And of course, they are techno multitaskers as well. And everything should be completely interconnected as part of that. So quite a different take on things. Also, personal freedom is non-negotiable as part of that. So, you know, really thinking quite, you know, differently. And as we say here, a digital native as well. So I suppose that really thought and took me on to thinking about the caring profession and design and processes. And I was sort of, when I said back at the beginning around the best way to predict the future is to invent it, was actually also, I think, to do with, I was going to talk about the mind, the body and the spirit, but I thought that would probably be too intense. So I thought I'd just pick up the mind and the spirit as part of that. And the, how important the caring profession is, and how we can shift the narrative and the perception of our professions to better support our relationships with society, and how a modern professional narrative can support making the professions a career of choice in what is a really competitive market now as well, and the need to operate sort of widely, I suppose, in collaboration to create a vision. And working together to help each other to do that, and really thinking about how we maximise efficiency through that transformation and collaboration. And I think that's really important to millennials and Gen Z. How do we get that flexibility and inclusion, and really find the pathway to yes on that? Thinking about patient-centred pathways and models of care. So that comes back to my point around actually having a lot more bite-sized information, communication differently, and really how clinical academic careers can really support those pathways. And we have, I think the 10-year plan, the Chief Nursing Officer for England's nursing midwifery strategy really supports an exciting opportunity ahead to develop that. And then really thinking about, I suppose, the culture of the profession, as I've talked about, things around care from hospital to community, analogue to digital, and treating sickness to preventing it, which obviously the three shifts in the 10-year plan, and how we capitalise on that. As I've said earlier, we really face significant challenges, as we saw in the pandemic, with other infectious diseases, the overall health and environment as well as part of that. And also climate change. If we think about the heat, we know that actually causes issues with preterm birth, stillbirth, and the impact on fetal growth as well. And actually midwives play a massive part in that. And really how we take that forward, and building the narrative to reflect this, so that the generations can help society to understand what is the role of nursing and midwifery, and innovate and deliver healthcare and life sciences. And I think that whole, when I've talked about reward and recognition, that workplace culture, creating that vision and values to help develop the culture, how we support leaders in the workplace to do that, and making sure that staff and patients' voices are heard. And importantly, that psychological safety. And that really comes up, quite strongly through the generations that need to feel safe in the workplace. So I suppose in summary, I'm thinking, finding a purpose in work with personal and professional growth. That whole, thinking about the mind and the spirit play an important role in keeping, I think, the generations engaged as we move through the changes that we have ahead of us as leaders, whilst focusing on the milestones of the future. And for me, that's been a really big part of my career, and how I've really reflected on that. And although I'm not very good at talking about myself, and I have avoided, as you can see, talking too much about myself as I've done this lecture, what I do really recognise is the generations, and thinking about my own generation and the changes that I went through, and what I've learned as I've moved through my career, and how we support people as they come through to their, to work to their potential, individually and as part of a team, whilst maintaining morale and well-being. and really that sort of national strategy as well, and not losing sight of the generations in leadership and shaping the future. And I'm really proud of that, and I'm proud of the career that I've had and continue to have, and how I can influence the professions. This slide, not very diverse, this slide, but actually I really thought that it really showed in terms of integrity. So really thinking about the traditionalists, baby boomers. Often the traditionalists are called the silent generation. Baby boomers, Gen X, and our millennials into Gen Z. And really thinking about what leadership looks like to them, and how do we transform and move between those leaderships as well. Knowing that many of our Zoomers actually would prefer to have millennial leaders, and how does that, how do we take that forward as leaders ourselves to make sure that those workplaces are the workplaces that people want to come into, the profession is where people want to be, and building that professional narrative, and really thinking about the mind and the spirit that we all need to have to do that. Thank you for listening to me. It's been a real pleasure to be here and to deliver this inaugural speech. Thank you.
So thank you, Tracey, for a very powerful and generous lecture from a fellow Gen Xer, which is definitely the best generation. And I realise that I'm keeping you all from alcohol, so I'll be brief, but I do need to formally close the lecture before handing back to Richard. So good evening, everyone. I'm Graham Lord. I'm the Senior Vice President of Health and Life Sciences at King's College London. I'm also the Executive Director of King's Health Partners, but actually importantly, I'm also on the same boards with Tracey and Avey as Chief Academic Officer, which is a non-executive director position, so I get the privilege over the last year to have worked with them on a weekly and monthly basis. I'm also a kidney and pancreas transplant doctor, which is my real identity, and also a researcher. So it's a real privilege to close this year's Perseverance Trust Nightingale Fellowship Lecture and to reflect on what we've heard tonight from Professor Avey, Bhatia, OBE, and Professor Tracey Carter, MBE. Sounds good, doesn't it? But before I speak about their lectures, I just want to begin by situating tonight in the wider context of our academic clinical partnership, because the very fact that Avey and Tracey are here delivering their inaugural lectures as professors of the practice of nursing speaks to the power of that partnership. And so what is King's Health Partners? Well, it's an academic health science centre that brings together King's College London with Guy's and St Thomas's, with King's College Hospital and South London and the Maudsley NHS Foundation Trusts. And across these organisations, we serve some of the most diverse, dynamic and complex communities in the entire country. King's Health Partners exists because no single part of the system, whether that's education, research or clinical service, can meet future healthcare challenges alone. So we must connect these strands and build shared capability and work in ways that accelerate discovery, strengthen the workforce and critically improve outcomes for patients. And this is why the appointments we celebrate tonight matter so deeply. Both Avey and Tracey are senior NHS chief nurses within our partner trusts, where they lead large, complex clinical workforces and set standards for quality, safety, culture and professional development. And now through their professorships at King's, they also join the academic leadership of the Florence Nightingale Faculty of Nursing, Midwifery and Palliative Care. Their dual roles, practice leaders and academic professors, is exactly what an academic health science centre is designed to cultivate. And they will help us bring frontline insight directly into teaching and align research questions with the realities of clinical care. Avey's lecture, Caring in the Digital Age, captured one of the central challenges facing the profession. How do we embrace digital transformation without weakening the humanity at the heart of care? If technology is to enhance rather than diminish care, it must be guided by leaders who understand that digital transformation is not only about technical skill, but about emotional intelligence, ethics, and the safeguarding of relationships between clinicians and patients. As many of you will know, King's Health Partners has recently launched its strategy to 2030, committed to reshaping health and care by connecting research, education and clinical practice, because we believe that's how we meaningfully improve health outcomes, reduce inequalities and prepare a workforce fit for the future. A core pillar of this strategy is accelerating digital health, but Avey's reflections remind us this must be guided by compassion, and frontline professionals must remain emotionally literate as they become digitally fluent. The challenge and the responsibility of King's is to ensure our workforce is equipped with the best training, knowledge and guidance to make that a reality, both now and in the future. Tracey's lecture on generational leadership shared a profound understanding of how inclusion, values and lived experience shape the culture, resilience and the identity of the profession. Her reflections on intergenerational collaboration, well-being and the evolving demands on nursing remind us that sustainable change within the profession depends on respect for diversity, recognition of personal journeys and a commitment to inclusivity. As Tracey mentioned, the pandemic has reshaped the professional identity of nurses and midwives. It tested the resilience, morale and emotional well-being of the nursing workforce like never before. And so Tracey's reflections remind us that supporting well-being is not supplementary, it's integral to safety, retention and excellence. And this too aligns closely with KHP's strategy to 2030, which places huge emphasis on professional development, staff well-being and building a culture where all individuals can thrive. So I think together their talks offer us complementary perspectives, spotlighting the future, technology, innovation and digital care, while grounding us in the enduring values of humanity and inclusivity. Their lectures remind us that nursing is facing some of its greatest pressures: staffing shortages, rising complexity of care and digitisation. Yet through leadership like theirs, we see a profession meeting these challenges with clarity and with purpose. I want again to acknowledge and thank the Perseverance Trust and the Nightingale Fellowship for their commitment to supporting nursing, midwifery and allied health professionals. It's so impressive that their funding is helping both our current students and helping open doors for students from underrepresented backgrounds. This is a true embodiment of the values that Tracey highlighted. Their work strengthens not only King's, but the communities we serve and also the future of the NHS. As Richard noted earlier, we're incredibly proud that King's is ranked #1 in the world for nursing. We can't say that enough, can we? We'll keep saying it until we're not. That achievement is in no small part thanks to all our colleagues and leaders across the faculty, including Professor Richard Harding himself. And so I'd just like to take a moment, as I've embarrassed Avey and Tracey, to embarrass Richard by congratulating him tonight on his recent permanent appointment as Executive Dean of the faculty. After serving as Interim Executive Dean for over a year already, I know Richard's academic vision and commitment to widening access will be vital as we continue to shape the future of nursing education and research. So in closing, it's been a real privilege actually. Thank you for the invitation to close tonight's inaugural lectures. This evening has celebrated not just two outstanding leaders, but the spirit, resilience and evolving future of the nursing profession. My sincere thanks to our speakers, Professor Avey Bhatia and Professor Tracey Carter, and to all of you for joining us tonight. And I'll now hand back to our host, Professor Richard Harding, before we move on to drinks and canapes. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Graham, for your closing remarks and for reiterating our shared view of the importance of KHP. It's something that's really at the heart of what we do. So thank you, and thank you again to Avey and Tracey for your generosity, for being with us this evening, and the leadership that you've shown that was evident in both of your presentations. And as a token of our appreciation, we would be glad if you would accept these flowers from us in the faculty as a thank you. There we go. Thank you.